Everybody, thanks for joining us on the Windows Phone Central Special Edition podcast. We're live here at, where are we, San Francisco, at the Marriott Marquis. It's been a very long day, and we're joined by special guest Paul Thurrott from the WinSuperSite. We can get Paul up on screen there, that'd be nice. Say hello, Paul.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad. Of course, Paul is actually, I think he's downstairs or upstairs. I forgot what floor he's on, but we just saw him only a couple minutes ago, and we're actually rushing to, we want to go tour San Francisco. So we're going to try to keep this podcast a little efficient. But yes, today we had a lot of big news. Of course, Microsoft revealed for the first time Windows Phone 8. We've, of course, expected to see this now for quite some time. And some of it wasn't that surprising, but there were some nuggets of real interesting things in there, including the updates, Windows Phone 7.8, and the new resolutions, NFC, Skype. I mean, there was actually a lot of stuff. So it's going to be kind of hard for us to talk about it. Let's just go around quickly. Rafael, you want to give your thoughts on today? What transpired?
There was a lot of sleeping. No, no, it was excellent. Some of the details that leaked were now confirmed. So that's great news. So for example, new resolutions came out. We got 3 of them. Let's see, what else? We have a whole bunch of enterprise support.
Oh, cool. They were having some little audio problems. Hold on.
Can you mute yours?
I don't know if I can.
Are you? You must be using his Lumia to make this call.
Can you just move this up? That's what I can do with mine. It mutes automatically.
Okay, is that any
all right, is the echo gone now? Let's see.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, so some new enterprise features. For example, there's full device encryption now. IT shops will be able to fully manage these things. We have new company hubs where IT shops can set up these beautiful apps with links to all these internal line of business apps. I don't know. What else?
Did you hit on the start screen tiles?
That's probably the biggest thing, right? So, Paul, why don't you walk us through the whole start screen and the changes that occurred there, and like what your thoughts are on, of course, on today's announcements, because it's been very big stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of people looked at the Windows Phone 7 start screen and wondered why there was that big gap on the right, with the arrow over there. And I think it was kind of a visual cue that they had done on Zune, and we don't really remember why, and it was just kind of there. And a lot of people complained about it. So in Windows Phone 8, they've gotten rid of that, and now the tiles take up the full screen. So they've added a third tile size. I'm not sure what the actual size. I think of them as large, small, and now smaller. Those are probably not the right names, but the smaller one, the new one, is 1/4 the size of the old square version. It's about the size of your fingertip. So you can have all those different sizes going as well.
Yeah, and so those changes, I think, were really sort of the big deal for today. And I think a lot of people actually like it. Now, one question we want to sort of answer that something we haven't really thought of, but a lot of people have asked us about. Do we still have the list of all the apps that we used to slide to? As far as I know, yeah, that's absolutely still there. You just don't have a visual cue anymore to slide over. But of course, all the apps are going to still be listed, and you still can pin things. So that concept has not changed at all. It's just you don't have that little gutter and the visual cue to bring yourself over. But what they did is they bought themselves some space. So now when you have that small tile, it's actually not that small, because if you had that gutter still, you would actually lose some space. So they kind of spread things out more. And I kind of like this idea of the customization now that people can do. You really can add a different level. And what's neat, like if you have what they call the double wide, the really large tile, say for your text messages, it'll actually show your whole text message now. We used to do this kind of on Windows Mobile, and it's kind of nice to have that feature brought over. And developers presumably going to be able to customize that to show different levels of content. And so that's kind of cool stuff. Rafael, do you want to say anything?
So is the mic working now, by the way?
Yeah, you sound better.
Let's see.
So is the mic working now, by the way?
Oh.
Okay.
Let's see.
just heard Paul confirm that.
I just heard Paul confirm that the mic was working. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss here.
All right, well, let's talk about Skype and VoIP integration there today. So not only is Skype coming to Windows Phone 8 in its full unfettered version, but it also is going to allow any VoIP application to sort of integrate in the same way. So Skype actually, although it's owned by Microsoft, is not getting really preferential treatment here. They're going to be just treated like any other VoIP. They'll be the premier kind of example just because of their name, but something like Viber and all these other companies can use the same APIs and the same tools to plug into Windows Phone. And that's going to be real impressive because now this stuff runs in the background. There's going to be background agents for it. You can do video calls coming in and it'll just sit there and you can go into your contacts and direct dial people. It's going to be a complete seamless integration. And I think there was some debate early on whether this was going to be a separate app or if it was going to be fully integrated and how carriers were going to respond. But it looks like Microsoft is just going full steam ahead with this. Paul, what are your thoughts about that in the carriers? There's been some discussion about how the carriers are really against Skype and, going to this level. Do you think it'll negatively affect Microsoft and how, they're going to be able to sell this to the carriers, or are they going to be able to customize it and work something out with them?
I'm just guessing, but I think the way that they presented it was smart by saying, look, we have Skype in there, but you can also add your own apps, Vonage or whatever else you might want to, any other voice over IP type app, or what they sort of refer to as like a rich communication suite or whatever type app, can integrate as directly into the system as, say, Skype could. So that gives the carriers at least the opportunity to promote their own stuff over Skype if that's what they want to do. And I think it removes that barrier where maybe carriers would have been afraid of Microsoft owning Skype before, thinking that they were going to get preferential treatment.
Gotcha. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how that rolls out, and I think it's going to be a really nice feature. But let's talk about another feature that's pretty funny, the nickname, the Paul Thurrott feature. And this was actually quoted by Microsoft, so this is actually kind of funny. But the Paul Thurrott feature refers to the ability to directly update our phones. So Microsoft, of course, has been working with the carriers, and at first it sounded really good. But, of course, Paul, you reported on how this notion that the carriers could just reject one update but not the other was actually false, and that actually the carriers were sort of the whole time in control. And now Microsoft seems to be going, okay, we'll just leave that as is since we can't win that fight, but we're going to give our users an opportunity to basically sideload OS updates for what they call the enthusiast user.
Right.
Explain to us how that's supposed to work. And what about 7.8? Are users going to be able to do that? I think you wrote that 7.8 is going to be done that method. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, they said that 7.8 would be made available to all existing phones that run 7.5, and that it would be freely available, obviously, and would be available in this fashion, in this new style of doing software updates. So people probably don't think about it this way, but the current software update scheme has always used Windows Update on the back end of the Microsoft Update service. And of course, as we switch to Windows 8 as the foundation of Windows Phone 8, it's using Windows Update, and so we can turn to a model that maybe more closely resembles what we see on Windows. My understanding of the plan that Microsoft has is that they're going to let enthusiasts register with them somehow, and that will gain them early access to updates. So even though a carrier may decide they want to hold off on a particular update, you can sign some documentation basically that says, look, I'm doing this of my own free will. I understand the responsibilities that I have in doing that I'm not going to get support from the carrier and so forth, because none of these people are.
Yeah, that's probably similar to what they did with the pre-release Windows Phone Mango bits, right? You would connect to the Connect site, sign some documentation, and you got the bits. So.
I think we're still getting some echo here. Yeah, sorry, folks. We're trying our best with local recording. It's a little tricky, but so this ability to sort of sideload the update, I think, is going to be really huge for users. I don't think it's a permanent solution, but it's certainly something. I think that's going to make a lot of people happy. Now, the 7.8 thing seems to be being mixed with mixed results basically from people, and so the question is. Are people going to be really happy with this? It seems like some are enjoying the cosmetic changes, but not necessarily the full lacking on those Windows Phone 8 abilities. But there are limitations here. Windows Phone 8 does have a different kernel, and how you upgrade that is sort of a problem. Not to mention you have the hardware differences. Windows Phone 8 brings in new things like the resolutions. Let's talk about that briefly. So there's going to be two new resolutions introduced. There's the 720 by 1280, and then there's a 764 by 1280. Now, I see some questions going on in the chat room asking like why that even exists. And we actually asked Microsoft this question too. The reason seems to be it's to give OEMs some flexibility when they're building these devices, so that basically the supply chain doesn't become too tight, and that you can actually offer a little bit of variability in a second option for building devices. So that seems to be a decent option for OEMs, and it's been done for them. As far as users, we might not see a total difference, although one could argue the 720 16 by 9 resolution is more of a true HD, and when you watch movies, I don't watch movies on my phone, but for those of you who do, you'll get that more true widescreen aspect without the black bars, so that'll fit more nicely. I guess shifting gears a bit, we can talk about some of the other announcements. Well, I mean, we could also mention, yeah, there's going to be more accent tiles for the colors, which I know a lot of people were kind of wondering about. I don't know, what else should we talk about?
Well, Nokia Maps, for one thing, it's not clear how they're going to deliver that, if it's going to be literally called Nokia Maps like it is on the Lumia, or if the Nokia stuff just comes through into the normal Maps app. But that was one of the things that actually got some cheers, which I thought was kind of interesting. Offline support, turn-by-turn navigation, a maps control that developers can use in their own app, background functioning and so forth. So that looks pretty solid.
Yeah, the Nokia Maps is definitely huge. Offline mapping. One thing that's been always pretty bad is the Bing driving directions. I mean, they work and they're not terrible, but certainly, apparently San Francisco is burning.
I'll wait till it comes around my corner of the building.
Yeah, right. But this Nokia version certainly seems a lot better. The offline mapping feature is going to be, I think, a really cool thing. And so, now is Nokia? Is that because Bing Maps in general is going to be powered by Nokia, or is this just a Windows Phone thing?
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay. Yeah, so, but at least we're seeing finally some of that relationship pay off, working the other way with Nokia services. I mean, in a lot of ways, this isn't too surprising since they've always sort of talked about this is happening. But now the question is kind of like, what else can we expect? Let's see, we also just got some news here. HTC and AT&T are both coming out saying publicly that they're huge fans and supporting Windows Phone 8. Not a huge surprise for either one of those. And of course, Nokia also once again, stole a bit of the show, announcing numerous app updates, including the Play 2, their DNA app, the Nokia Counter, which is interesting.
Actually,
now,
can I ask you a question about that stuff?
Yeah.
I noticed that some of those apps are not available in the United States, at least yet, and they're being updated. Nokia Music would be one of the big ones. Do you know anything about whether they're going to make those apps more broadly available? Are we going to get them here?
Yeah, for my understanding, Nokia Music, probably not. What I understand it's a licensing issue, and then basically Nokia is offering that as an alternative to Zune, where some of the Zune Music service isn't available to their users, specifically in the emerging and developing markets. Of course, Europe has it too. But I'm getting sort of mixed results when I talk to Nokia about that. I'm not expecting it, especially now we have the Xbox Music coming out in the fall. They didn't really go into that stuff too. Like, for instance, the marketplace is supposedly going to be renamed to just Store to be more in alignment with Windows 8 desktop. And so we have that rebranding issue that needs to come up. But with Nokia, I'm not expecting some of these apps to actually be released here in the US, which is kind of a downer. On the other hand, if you have a Zune Pass, what's soon to be an Xbox Music Pass, hopefully, it's not that big of a deal. But Nokia sort of, I guess, stole the show. Their camera app, well, we were joking around earlier, of course, follow me, and about how bad cameras are. But it's nice to see at least them being this feature over with the new camera app and those extensions. Actually, Microsoft skipped over a lot of stuff in today's talk. We won't go into necessarily the details. We don't want to steal their thunder. But there's a lot more that has to be revealed yet. I mean, people need to understand, of course, this wasn't a consumer release today or a consumer preview. It was mostly about the platform as a whole. And speaking of, like, one of their big focuses, of course, was that NT kernel, which is now driving Windows Phone 8. This is something we've talked about for a long time now, this idea that they're getting parity between all their systems. Paul, what do you think about them switching to NT? You've kind of known about the legacy of how Windows Mobile's come to be and how they've always sort of talked about putting it on the same playing field as their desktop. I actually didn't expect this to happen to Windows Phone 9, whatever that means. But it seems like they actually kind of accelerated this. Do you have any feeling about what drove this and how that all lined up?
Yeah, I think back to this comment that Steven Sinofsky made probably last year at Build, where he was talking about how they were moving into devices with Windows 8, and he was saying that when you look at a phone today, and you see a device that has a 1.0 to 1.5 gigahertz processor, non-Windows phones have multi-core processing now. The screen resolutions are getting up to HD range. They've got integrated graphics hardware. He said that thing is a PC. And I think that realization wasn't just on the Windows end, it was also on the Windows Phone end, and that they realized they could move this thing onto the phone fairly easily. I mean, I guess there's some questions around how all that's going to work. I guess we'll see what those things look like. But I suspect that the Windows Phone 8 experience is going to be very similar from performance, battery life, et cetera, to what we're going to see on Windows RT, and I actually expect that to be pretty good. So it's the flip side, of course, is I really still like Windows Phone as it is now, the Silverlight / XNA platform that we have. There's something very simple and elegant about it, and something to be said for starting over from scratch with something that's designed specifically for that kind of scenario. But obviously, time moves forward. There's not much we can do about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a big decision for them to make, and obviously this is the second time they've sort of had to break with their own audience in terms of moving people over. Of course, the first time was Windows Mobile to Windows Phone. That was a big break. This isn't nearly as big because Windows Phone 7 apps, of course, will all still work on Windows Phone 8, and there is that compatibility. Now, there's the question, a lot of people are wondering, Windows Phone 8 apps, can they run on Windows Phone 7 devices? And the answer is a little bit nuanced, but basically, right? Windows Phone 8 apps that use native coding can't run on Windows Phone 7 devices, but developers can sort of code for both. Just one will have some features limited. Is that your understanding of how this is going to work too?
I think that they can't use any of the new Windows Phone 8 APIs either, right, for that to work. Right. So, I mean, essentially what you're creating is a Windows Phone 7 app at that point, I think. Right. But that's how I understood it, yeah.
Yeah, so of course now it's going to raise the question, the fragmentation issue. Do you think it's going to be a major concern for users and something that developers need to necessarily worry about? Or do you think that the user base for Windows Phone 7 is small enough that, I hate to say it, that you can almost kind of ignore them a little bit as you push people onto Windows Phone 8?
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, one of the big questions I've been getting today from readers is, okay, so 7.8 is coming, I get that. And so how do we get updates after that? And it's like, I don't actually think you're getting updates after that, unfortunately. I mean, I think that form of abandonment is just starting to kind of settle in on people. But we go through these technology transitions. It's a little bit like moving from DOS and Windows to Windows NT, right? With Windows XP, you had this thing that, was Windows, but it was really a different code base, but it ran the same apps and the drivers all worked and all that kind of stuff. And Windows Phone 8 is like that, but yeah, it's not gonna come forward on your existing hardware, unfortunately.
And one thing they did talk about today, of course, was it seems like there's a brighter road ahead for Windows Phone 8 users. They did guarantee that any device that comes out from the release of that device for 18 months, they'll provide software OS upgrades. And they've basically guaranteed that. Now, of course, promises can be broken, but it was actually kind of nice to see them commit to something like that publicly, something we haven't actually seen yet from someone like Apple, who actually kind of does support their back-end devices, but then there's a question of how well it runs. So that was kind of nice to see. And I think people also need to understand this switch is going to allow them so much more flexibility. I was talking to Dieter Bohn from The Verge. He was asking, well, but this time next year, 720p screens aren't going to be the big deal. It's going to be higher res. Then what? But the thing is, it's with this new kernel, they can scale up indefinitely, basically. They joked around that technically this kernel will allow them to run 64-core devices, which of course they don't exist, and there's not going to be a phone with 64 cores, but it goes to show you how much this can scale. So I think as they roll out these updates, which they also mentioned are over the air now, which is pretty impressive, you know, they can come out with new hardware support and allow new screens. So, Rafael, you haven't chatted a little bit here. What are your kind of thoughts on what they're doing here with the screen resolutions, the NT kernel? You kind of do some development with this stuff. You know, do you think it's a big, important shift for them? And, you know, what's the impact?
So we should switch.
Okay.
All right, we're going to try to switch headsets here. Yeah, like Daniel said, the NT kernel definitely lets us scale up. We're no longer constrained by a single core. You know, I don't have much to say on this. I want to get to all the nitty gritty stuff coming up.
I'm still laughing just because we have a little bit of echo, I think.
Oh, do we?
Yeah. Should probably just use one headset. Make this a little bit easier. Next time we'll plan better, folks. Sorry. So yeah, the nitty gritty stuff comes later this summer. Microsoft's going to release the SDK. I think, Paul, you were sort of expecting or hoping at least that an SDK would be released today, and you know, to get this stuff out, because it seems like they're sort of pushing time frames. We're expecting Windows Phone 8 to come out sometime in the fall. This is late summer. They'll have their developer, you know, meetings at that point. But they got a lot of work to do, it seems like, between now and whenever that is. So it's going to be an interesting question. They can stick to that timetable. So I don't know. Let's see what else we talk about. There's been quite a few updates.
Native stuff.
You want to talk about native C++?
Yes.
Okay. What do you want to talk about native C++?
Well, there's the...
For gaming. This is a big thing. What was it, Havoc?
Havoc engine, yes. It's like Unity, move over. Yeah. Havoc is here now.
So explain this. Why, you know, Unity is kind of cool, but why is Havoc a big deal? Because I don't know much about like gaming and like what Havoc does.
Right. So Havoc, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's a 3D or / physics engine that's already on multiple platforms, including PC, probably iPhone, Android, etc. So it has its roots in native code, though, for maximum performance. And that was something that couldn't be ported over to Windows Phone because, you know, it didn't support native code. But now with the native code in Apollo, or Windows Phone 8, sorry, they're going to bring that over. We're going to see these rich experiences, all the physics, power that the engine accelerates. And some of the graphics they showed during the demos look like stuff out of Unreal.
Yeah, they totally do. And we should mention that Havoc powers things like Skyrim, Halo, and Assassin's Creed. So it kind of gives you the level. And they mentioned they went out of their way to kind of point out how it took them only 3 weeks to port some of this right to Windows Phone 8. So they said it was basically a really easy task. Yep. So they really focus on the C++ stuff is going to be really good for apps, regular apps, but it's really the gaming stuff that they're really pushing here. That it's going to allow two things. It's going to allow richer, more vibrant games with these high, you know, res graphics and this 3D physics, but it's also going to allow app portability. So if you develop a game on iOS or Android, you're going to be able to easily bring it over to Windows Phone, where currently they have to like recode it for the system. And not only do they have to recode it, but they basically put shackles on what they can and can't do regarding shading and polygons and all this kind of stuff. So this is a pretty nice thing. We're going to finally turn into hopefully a solid gaming platform, because you have the Xbox Live stuff, but yeah, it's kind of nice. Paul, what are your thoughts on gaming? You're not a huge mobile gamer, are you? But you like those sort of little casual games. What about Zynga today? That was kind of interesting. Did we lose Paul? I think we might have lost him.
Okay.
Nope, you there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little breaking up a little bit. Someone's uploading a video somewhere, killing our internet.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, maybe we'll have Paul call back in. And...
So yeah, Zynga announced that they're fully committed to bringing Words with Friends, and what's the other one? Is it Draw With Me?
What? Yeah, not Draw With Me. It's
Is it Paint With Me? Draw With Me?
Draw with Friends? No. What? Hold on.
They're bringing their 2 top games to the Windows Phone platform. That's huge. And Daniel's clicking buttons here.
Yeah, sorry. We're just having a little bit of a audio issue.
We got Paul back.
Okay. Paul, you there?
And we lost him again.
Draw something.
Draw something. Okay, but the rest of the chat room can hear us, right?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so the big thing was Zynga today announcing, Words with Friends and all this. Now, they didn't show anything for this, in case you're wondering with some screen grabs or anything. This was strictly an announcement, which tells us this was pretty last minute and they're still in development for it. So I wouldn't expect anything to sort of, come out into the late fall, but it would be certainly nice to finally get that. Microsoft is obviously aggressively trying to cater to these companies to get them to come over, and it looks like that's finally happening. We still haven't seen anything from Nokia with their exclusive games and EA. There's nothing shown about that today, but at least they're going out of the way. Audible is coming out today. In fact, we should be checking to see in the marketplace if that's actually out. I know Paul's been beta testing that for a long time. He's a big fan of that. And they showed some of the more advanced voice stuff that's coming with Windows Phone 8. We alluded to this in one of our posts, but basically as a developer, you can now code for the speech engine, meaning, for instance, the Windows Phone Central app, I'm talking to Jay about this. He can basically code so that you can hit the start button, start Windows Phone Central, and then it'll launch the app. And then you can even tell it to go to specific sections, and then you can even dictate your text message to it. So you can do a comment verbally. And developers are going to be able to do this for any app. So they can just put in the specific commands and you can just say it. And you can hop to specific parts of the app and do all sorts of things. And that's actually really powerful. As far as I know, iPhone doesn't do that, and Android certainly doesn't do that. You can always launch the app, but you can't do commands within it. And doing that commands within the app is actually a pretty big thing. Now, Rafael, we were kind of joking around about this. So they showed the Audible app with this voice command stuff, and it worked well. I mean, it actually does work, but then it raises the question for us, which is it faster than actually hitting the buttons? Now, certainly there are instances where using audio is preferable if your hands are full or you're driving, I suppose, or I don't know what you're doing, but I don't know.
Or why you might otherwise need your hands.
Yeah. I mean, let's not go there. But I don't know, Paul. What did you think about this, Rafael?
Yeah, so I think it was a demo, right? Yeah. So he was just trying to show off the speech integration. I think this is one of the few apps that actually supports it. So, they had to scrounge at what they could show. Yeah, definitely. He was saying things like pause, stop, and it was taking 5-10 seconds to actually perform that action.
Right.
So that was definitely drawn out. But I think we'll start to see more and more apps come out now that fully leverage this API and do some cool things. Yeah. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, no, I think voice control is actually really important. On the Kinect and the Xbox, it's more important, I think, than the motion stuff. And like you said, when you're driving around in a car, you shouldn't be fiddling with your phone, and that's a great way to control what you're doing, whether you're interacting with the navigation controls or whatever. So I think that stuff's really important.
Yeah, the Inrix demo. So unfortunately, you guys can't watch what the Inrix demo was. They showed like a video. Inrix does the traffic app. It's already on Windows Phone. It's okay. It's a little slow, but they're obviously working on Windows Phone 8 version, which is way more intense and has richer graphics, and it takes advantage of some more advanced voice stuff. So they showed a woman in a car, and there's traffic. It was an accident, and it has to reroute her and all this kind of stuff on the fly. And there was a text message coming in, and she's doing it all via voice. And that situation's right. And Paul makes a good point about the Connect. I love Connect, but the gesture system I don't ever use for like Netflix or Hulu. I always use voice, because when I'm getting up to go, to the bathroom or I want to get a drink, I always just tell Xbox verbally to pause. So voice stuff is kind of nice in that regard. And that's one of the more exciting features. I see people in the room asking a lot about notifications. Like we said, they didn't show anything off today. We can just say that Microsoft has thought about this, and there are there is something with notifications coming in Windows Phone 8 that I think a lot of people are going to really like, and I think developers will really like. But we don't want to spill the beans for Microsoft just yet. But they're not ignoring that notifications kind of get fixed with Windows Phone 8, at least to a certain extent. I think they can still do a little bit more, but they're going to address that. And there's a lot of stuff that they're sort of addressing. One thing I want to bring up too, we were kind of joking before about a screenshot app. Someone asked yesterday about that, if they can do a screenshot. And then Paul, you made a good point that, well, with C++ and native coding, anyone can make a screenshot app now, and anyone can actually use that. So I guess that's how Microsoft is going to give us a screenshot app, is just letting the market give us a screenshot app, which is kind of nice. It goes to show you sort of the power of Windows Phone 8 coming out. Yeah, so let's see, what else could we talk about? There's actually so many little things. Paul, do you have anything that you thought was really big that maybe was overlooked?
I had to close all my windows because I was afraid Skype was going to die, but off the top. I mean, I found it interesting that they brought out Nokia as sort of a, sorry, we're not doing any more with 7, but here's some new Nokia apps. I mean, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. It doesn't necessarily benefit everyone because, of course, not everyone has a Nokia device. But I think the biggest complaints have been from Lumia 900 users. And I think the point there was just that, well, there will be support for Nokia too. And, unlike some of the other Windows Phone makers, those guys are doing their own development, a lot of their own development. And so there'll be stuff there. And I thought that was kind of a nice message. Yeah, I don't know.
Actually, something. Yeah, no, there was just so much. We've been up all night, and it's just all of us had long days. But one thing actually we completely skipped over that's pretty impressive is Wallet. So Wallet is, Windows Phone Wallet is a combination of two important things. It's NFC technology as well as basically the passport feature that's involved with Apple, and they're taking. Now, we don't know if Apple's going to have NFC in iOS 6. It wasn't revealed, but we talked about this earlier, how had Apple said, oh, Passport does NFC, everybody would have known that the next iPhone has NFC, and that's not how Apple does things. So for all we know, they may have it or add it. But Windows Phone is taking both on at the same time, and this is actually a really nice feature for a couple of reasons. First, the NFC is really powerful. It's not, you can use it for payments and secure payments, which is becoming slowly bigger and bigger. This is one of those things sort of like GPS, which took a while. Everybody knew it was coming, but it still hasn't hit critical mass. But you can go to some Starbucks today and McDonald's, I think, and use your phone. So it's going to support that. It also supports the tap to share, which they demonstrated with Windows 8 desktop. Basically, you just tap the tablet or whatever that has it, and you can transfer a contact or all sorts of media information. They didn't specify what type. They just said lots of content will be supported. But you can also store your passwords, your frequent flyer mileage, your credit cards.
Don't forget coupons.
And coupons. Yeah, that was actually good. Well, that was kind of neat, right? Yeah. And then app developers can, of course, tap into this. That's what's really neat. So I don't know, did he mention in-app payments today?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so that was so in-app payments, developers now can, especially in games, can have all sorts of new features and things within there, then they can charge you for it, which sounds kind of sketchy, but it's actually a really nice system. Developers really need that. And now they can just pull right into your wallet, and you can just charge directly, including PayPal, which is supported directly. I don't know, Rafael, what do you think about this?
The other thing that, I'm sorry.
No, go on, Paul. No, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, they also glossed over app tap sharing, which sounds like it's a technology that's based somewhat on contracts in Windows 8. It's not really clear if that's what that is, but in Windows 8 today, Windows Phone today, you can share, right? And that's how the tap and send sharing will work through the share page. But this is app to app sharing, which is interesting and goes beyond that kind of copy and paste functionality, that they added about a year ago. Right. And I think I think that might be an interesting area at some point. We just don't know a lot about it yet.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like an important thing. And it kind of mirrors the voice thing before, where voice control now goes deep into the app and the sharing goes within the app too. So you can actually, transfer information directly. I think the NFC stuff is really impressive. And when everybody hopefully has Windows Phone 8 devices with NFC. It's going to be, I think, an extremely useful feature compared to, Bluetooth. There is more advanced Bluetooth support in Windows Phone 8. They didn't talk about it today, but, they're not ignoring that either. So we'll just, once again, leave that for Microsoft to discuss. But they didn't forget it.
They mentioned two things about that, didn't they? First of all, it's the Bluetooth stack based on Windows 8, which suggests it's the very latest version of Bluetooth. And I don't do a lot with Bluetooth accessories in Windows 8, but the reason is a lot of them just seem not to work very well. I don't remember that. You probably know more about this than I do, but there's only certain classes of devices are supported and so forth, and some don't.
Right.
Some work better than others. I don't know if stereo headsets are supported or not, but it seems like as a result of this move to the Windows 8 code base that they're going to get much, much better support for Bluetooth devices. And I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of people too.
Right. Yeah, like one thing with Bluetooth, right now it doesn't support one class. It's HID, the human interface devices, basically keyboards, right?
Keyboards, yeah.
Your Windows Phone will see the keyboard, but it can't pair with it. And now external keyboards are still a little niche thing out there, but stuff like that people actually really kind of want. And you can actually do some creative things with Bluetooth. And basically someone asked, what's the connection between NFC and Bluetooth? It's just another method for sharing. Not everybody has NFC on their phone, so you want another method. Well, Bluetooth is more universal. So the ability to share content via Bluetooth I think it's slower than NFC, which is why NFC is preferred, plus uses less battery. But giving that option for users to sort of fall back onto a Bluetooth sharing, I think is actually pretty nice. So that is probably like another, big deal. Trying to think what else. There was so much revealed today. As many people in the audience have some questions. I'm sure they always do. We got a lot of people in the chat room today, actually almost 1,000 people. Camera features, someone asked about. They didn't talk about camera features today. There are more advanced camera features in Windows Phone 8. It's actually a big thing in Windows Phone 8 as far as cameras. HTC has publicly talked about this. It's not really a secret. But that is certainly something that's going to be a focus on, and developers and OEMs are going to have a ball with it. I think it was on CNET recently, they called for Windows Phone should be the camera phone. System, right? Well,
sure.
Nokia won't get them there, no, it's not now. But this is something that Windows Phone actually has a leg up on the competition with. So hopefully we can sort of, see more of that come in the future. Let's see. Is there anything else we glossed over? Probably. No, we did the Nokia thing, over-the-air updates.
They talked about the hardware makers, right? And a certain number of, I think it was 50 languages, 180 plus countries. It was Samsung, Nokia, HTC, and a Chinese company. Whose name escapes me. That will be.
Yeah, Huawei is kind of interesting. They were supposed to make Windows Phone 7 devices, and then all of a sudden sort of like pulled out at the last second. Looks like they're holding out for Windows Phone 8. Right. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting combo. I think HTC, Samsung, Nokia were always expected to be there, and it's nice to see them reaffirm. There were some rumors that HTC has been sidelined by Microsoft for tablets.
Yeah,
I don't really know if that's true. I'm not really putting much emphasis on it, but clearly for phones, HTC's come out publicly and said, we're all on board with Windows Phone 8. So I think those three actually Samsung and HTC make some of the best Android phones. So it's nice to see them over with Windows Phone 2. We can expect good hardware. Nokia, of course, not surprising. Qualcomm is the only one making chipsets. That's kind of interesting. ST Ericsson has been boasting for a while that they were going to be part of Windows Phone 8. And so far, they're not.
And do we know if this is a new... Is this a new chipset, or is it? Do we know anything about that?
They didn't specify with hardware, and they said we're not really going to talk about chipsets today. I know they're supporting some of the latest out there, but what that exactly means, we're not too sure. It's just going to be when they say multi-core, so that's something to think about. They'll just support dual core at first because that's really all they need. One thing that's interesting with the dual core, developers can sort of, when they do the native stuff, can take advantage of the dual core. Apparently, there's actually methods of doing that when they code their apps. Rafael, can you talk about that briefly about coding and dual cores, how that works?
So I don't really do a lot of dual core specific coding, but having multiple cores obviously gives you access to more threads, which is always nice when you're doing asynchronous coding stuff running in the background while stuff in the foreground's running at the same time. So there are performance gains there to be had, of course.
I think Microsoft joked around almost that like they didn't want to come off as being dismissive of dual cores, last year, but now they kind of joked around that like when they couldn't do it, they were dismissive, but now it's kind of like they're kind of fans of it. But they put forth the statement that they always believed in dual cores, but it needs to be done right. And so the question is, it's sort of like, well, what do they actually mean by that? What does Windows Phone 8 do specifically that makes it done right as opposed to what Android does? Paul, do you have a view on that?
Honestly, I think Windows Phone 7 runs wonderfully well, right? I don't think anyone has ever used this thing and said, wow, this thing should have dual core processors. That would solve all these problems. There are no problems. It runs great. Once you move up to Windows, real Windows, Windows 8, obviously multi-core is preferable. Anyone who's used a single core Atom based system knows that single core systems aren't great for Windows. It's designed to do a bunch of different things at the same time. It's just a more complex operating system. So I think the reality is that Windows, Phone 8, Windows 8 almost requires multiple cores in some ways when you think about it. It probably becomes more of a concern just because of the complexity of the system.
Right.
That's my take on it. I mean, I have never run into an issue in Windows Phone 7, whatever, where I thought, wow, the hardware is a problem. These things all run really well.
Yeah. And now with Windows Phone 8,
except for Raphael's.
It's going to be important that we put maybe something like Skype on its own core, because it's going to be sending hardcore video and high quality audio.
Yeah, between that, gaming, and I would say IE10 can probably take advantage of this stuff too. IE10, that was actually something we kind of glossed over. IE10 is sort of a big deal. I think that was totally expected to come, but it is the full desktop version of IE10, which isn't even technically out yet. They are bringing that safe browsing feature, which I actually forgot the name of.
Smart
Screen.
Yeah, smart screen. So, Paul, want to talk about smart screen? I'm a little unfamiliar with that, but I think you've been following that a lot more closely.
Yeah, I don't know how relevant this is on the phone, but the point of it on Windows is that it prevents you from downloading malware using a sort of a reputation service that runs up in the cloud. And there are known bad files, and then there are known good files, and then there are files that may be suspicious, and based on certain characteristics, it may throw up a warning. And in Windows 8 on the desktop, they've added Smart Screen to the OS so that if you use a different browser than IE, or if you maybe were going to contract some malware in some other fashion by copying it over a USB key or whatever, that it could just pop up whenever. So in Windows Phone 8, it's a feature of IE10, the browser, and it will prevent you in the same fashion from downloading malware to the phone. Although, again, as of today, that's not really a huge issue on Windows Phone. Maybe that changes as we move to a Windows core.
Right. Yeah, and Microsoft ran into some controversy because now in IE10, supposedly they're going to have this on by default, which has thrown off some advertisers because of the way they use cookies. Google ran into this issue with how they were abusing the cookie system. So there's that issue, but it sounds like it's actually a good thing to have. I'd rather have it than not. We still haven't seen IE10 running on Windows Phone 8, what that actually means. They did throw up some SunSpider numbers and showed how it was very impressive.
It was interesting. They actually compared it to iOS 6 beta.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know much about iOS 6 and what its browser is actually doing, but yeah.
Well, yeah. And if you're lucky, you never will. But I think that Apple got in a little trouble last week. They had said something they had made a comparison between the beta version of, I think it was Safari, and previous versions of other browsers. So I think it was nice that Microsoft was able to go into this and say, here's the version we've got coming, and here's the version they've got coming. This was a real nice apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, definitely. And so it'll be kind of cool to see how that comes out in the fall. Let's see some other things quickly. We're going to start winding down, I think, pretty soon. But Microsoft announced they had 100,000 apps. This was sort of old news. There's always issues about how you're counting apps because a lot of apps aren't available anymore. They're pulled, and some are available in certain countries. But now Microsoft is officially claiming 100,000 apps. sort of irrelevant, but yet sort of not. I mean, this is one of those things we like to sort of blow off and just say it's not important. At the same time, mass media always picks this up. That 100,000 is a nice milestone they can kind of put under their belts. I think anyone who just goes into the marketplace and scans under the new and just keeps browsing, you're going to realize it's junk, 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 good app, junk, junk. So there's still that issue. I think we do have a lot of good quality apps, but just like anything else, there's going to be a lot of poor things. But it goes to show you that, at least from my discussions with game developers, specifically at E3, there's a lot of excitement about Windows Phone 8. I think because of all this native programming and everything, that these game developers are really, really excited. So I think for the first time, we're actually going to start to really see now a big push coming to Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. Now, it's not code once and you're done for all systems, but it's getting there. It's kind of closer. There's a lot of overlap in the code. I think that's going to be a big deal for developers. If you're making a Windows Phone app, alter the code a little bit, spend a week or two. Hopefully you can bring it over to the desktop fairly easily, vice versa too, So that's actually a pretty powerful system in place that no one else, as far as I know, can really claim. So. Oh, and by the way, yeah, we're wearing, I don't know if you can see it on the video, we have these awesome t-shirts. Let's see, hold on, I gotta see if we can, yeah, these are actually.
I forgot to wear mine.
Yeah, these are official Windows 8 soccer jerseys that they gave out. So you guys can all be sort of jealous of our.
No, but we did get them something.
Oh, geez.
That's true, yeah. So briefly show off what we're going to be giving away here.
So we were walking around to the tables, and we grabbed a bunch of Xbox avatar adornments. Here's one of them. See if you can see it on the camera here.
Yeah, we got a little delay. Someone's going to totally copy that code now.
That's okay. Go for it.
So if you can screen cap that, you can use that code to get yourself a free avatar prop.
Yep. So we got one that turns your body into a Windows Phone for some reason. One is a foam finger. And I don't know what else we have here, but
yeah, we actually showed this.
You can give Windows Phone the finger.
Yeah, right. Pretty much. So we actually have a bunch of those that we sort of stole, borrowed, but we're not charging you. We're going to do a contest maybe later. We're just going to have a random you comment in the article, and we'll email you the code.
Yeah. And
that'll be kind of cool. I know you guys all love these avatar props. Oh, and San Francisco is burning again, so bad day here apparently for flyers. Real quickly, we got about 5 minutes left, and we're going to wrap this up. Guys in the chat rooms, did we forget something that you really want to hear that we can answer, that you think we can actually answer to? If you guys probably have a lot of questions about 7.8, we can try to answer. I'll pre-answer some of that. 7.8 is only the start screen. That's it from Windows Phone 8. You're not going to get anything else. It's strictly cosmetic. It's a nice cosmetic thing. I think it makes actually a big deal for user interface, but you're not going to get any more advanced stuff. While we're waiting on some questions coming in, Paul, did you have any last minute things you want to talk about that you might have thought about? Oh, let's see. Someone's asking about the Windows Phone 8 dev.
I'm glad that Audible is out. What's that?
Right. No, I was gonna say, yeah. I'll talk about Audible for a second. You've been opining about this coming up for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I get so much feedback about the Audible stuff. I'm just amazed, that this took so long, but I'm glad that it's here. It was actually a little bit of a surprise that they were going to release it this week, so that was nice. I think it was just nice. It's a nice thing. Apparently, this is a big blocker for some people, so now that that's out of the way, I expect you all to upgrade to Windows Phone today. But I'm looking forward to the developer stuff. They kind of glossed over this, but there's a developer environment coming based on Visual Studio that they did finally admit is going to use the Windows 8 Hyper-V to host the emulator for Windows Phone 8. So that's very interesting. I'm curious to see that. But, like a lot of Microsoft events, it's kind of incomplete. So we have this kind of incomplete picture of what Windows Phone 8 is. I think the stuff we've seen is very exciting. But, as always, I want to know more. And I can't wait to see the developer stuff they do, and then also the end user features, however they decide to announce that. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Right. And just to add on to what Paul said there, it's coming out in the summer. That's all they announced.
the Windows, the SDK is coming out, sometime this summer. So there's definitely a lot more. Like I said, the consumer, they didn't do consumer stuff. They told us basically because you can't buy Windows Phone 8, so they don't want to try to sell this yet to you as as an idea of something to buy, which actually makes sense. It's big to tease, but then everybody hates when you tease the whole OS, and it's like, but you can't have it for 5 months. So I think they're trying to steer clear a little of that, with at the same time trying to tease people and keep them, in the news, which I think you're doing well. Let's see. I'm trying to read through some of these questions that people are asking. Someone asked about the Bluetooth. We already mentioned it. Yeah, you'll have access as a developer to Bluetooth APIs. It's the same as Windows 8, so that's pretty cool. Let's see.
Regarding the .NET SDK, we're not sure what's in the final bits they're going to give out. But you are writing to Windows Phone's version of WinRT. So probably not coming.
Device backup, SMS, MMS. They didn't talk about that, but you've seen some leaked screenshots with SkyDrive built in. Those are accurate. So if you look at those screenshots, you'll see that they have SMS and MMS backup. So that will back up to your SkyDrive server. So that's pretty cool. Verizon, Paul, do you have anything to say on Verizon? You're sort of a big person on this story.
I've heard yes. I've now heard yes. I've heard that AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon at least are on board with Windows Phone 8.
There you go. So yeah, Verizon, they've been rumored for a long time to be supporting Windows Phone 8, and all signs are pointing to yes, they're going to be not only a big supporter. I wouldn't be surprised if they launch multiple devices. I think they may start to be coming around and may do the Droid thing with Windows Phone. And no one's the funny thing about the iPhone is none of the carriers are totally happy with it because Apple got their way, and
I don't.
it's everybody's
sometimes
sort of
when you get what you want.
Right. Yeah, well, there's Sprint, right? Sprint's a perfect example. They got what they wanted, and now they're just up to their eyeballs in iPhone debt. I think Windows Phone now is really starting to turn out to be this serious contender. So yes, if you're on Verizon, I would expect some big releases this fall. Sprint, no word from them. And yeah, someone said I left Sprint. Yeah, even I have an old legacy Sprint account, which I'm probably going to get rid of. And, vote with your wallet, people. Go where the carriers, offer what you want. More colors. We talked about there are more accent colors coming. There is no picker for it. At least right now, there isn't a picker. They're going to be pre-selected colors. It's kind of lame, but still the nice choices. So you get what you can. Not a huge deal. Okay, I think that's about it. We're going to wrap this up because we're going to go out now and enjoy San Francisco while there's still light. Paul, thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you check out WinSuperSite. Of course, I think all of you guys check out his stuff every day. Always most thorough writing on Microsoft and Windows Phone as well. Rafael?
Never bringing a tablet. Yeah. Never using a wireless headset.
Yeah, Rafael tried to be experimental today with pushing the boundaries of technology, and it failed.
I'm just going to bring my desktop next time.
There you go. So, guys, thank you all for joining us. It was a great podcast. We'll have more news coming up, and we'll get you what we can on Windows Phone 8. But make sure you leave your comments, and we'll take care of it. We'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.